A grieving father spotted a boy who looked exactly like his lost son, standing alone in the storm. As he drew closer, the boy revealed a truth that shattered his world. Elliot Warren, a successful entrepreneur and single father, found his joy in the laughter of his 5-year-old son, Leo. After losing his wife, Sarah, to an illness 3 years ago, Elliot poured his energy into being both a father and mother to Leo. His boy was everything: a bright, curious child who loved drawing superheroes, racing toy cars, and spending hours under the large oak tree in their backyard. When Elliot met Clara, he thought he'd found a new beginning. She was sophisticated and kind, and while her bond with Leo wasn't immediate, she seemed genuinely interested in being part of their little family. After 2 years of marriage, however, Elliot noticed subtle tensions. Clara was often impatient with Leo's chatter and dismissed his questions with a quick, "Go play, darling." Elliot attributed it to adjustment difficulties and hoped time would mend things. It was a gray Tuesday when Elliot's world shattered. Sitting in his sleek office overlooking the city skyline, he was finalizing a deal when his phone buzzed on his desk. Clara's voice on the other end was frantic, almost incoherent. "There's been an accident, Leo. The hospital, he's gone." The pen in Elliot's hand slipped, falling to the floor. "What do you mean gone?" His voice trembled. Her explanation came in broken sobs. "I swerved to avoid a truck, Elliot. I tried to control the car, but Leo, he didn't make it." The room spun. I'll be there." His legs felt like he stumbled to his car, the city's bustling streets blurring into meaningless motion during the drive to the hospital. When Elliot arrived, Clara was sitting in the waiting room, her mascara streaked with tears. It was so fast she choked out. The doctor said it was instantaneous. He didn't suffer. Elliot barely processed her words. "I need to see him." Clara shook her head vehemently. "No, the injuries, Elliot, you don't want that memory of him." Grief overtook him, drowning out his doubts. His heart felt like it had been ripped from his chest as he collapsed into Clara's arms. The next few days were a whirlwind. Clara took charge of the funeral arrangements, moving with surprising efficiency. She arranged for a closed casket, citing the need to protect Elliot from the trauma. As they laid Leo to rest beneath a slate-gray sky, Elliot clutched a crayon drawing his son had made just days before, a picture of them holding hands under the oak tree, with the words, "You're my hero, Dad." But grief soon gave way to unease. The funeral had been too fast, too orchestrated. Clara had shut down any discussion of details and dismissed his request for answers with a tight smile. One night, unable to sleep, Elliot wandered into Leo's room. The untouched toys and unmade bed were too much. He collapsed onto the floor, his fingers brushing against a stack of papers on Leo's desk. Among the drawings was one that made his blood run cold. It was of a woman, a crude figure with sharp red eyes and clawed hands. Above it, Leo had written shakily, "She lies." Far from the safety of home, Leo wandered alone in the sprawling city. The car crash replayed endlessly in his mind, the sound of screeching tires, the sharp jolt as the vehicle veered off the road, and then Clara's cold voice telling him to stay quiet as she dragged him out of the wreck. She said Dad didn't love me anymore, Leo whispered to himself, tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. The alley where Clara had left him was dark and foul-smelling. His head throbbed where it had struck the doorframe, and a deep gash above his eyebrow oozed blood. The infection set in quickly, making his small body burn with fever. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, and his thin arms wrapped tightly around his knees for warmth. For days, Leo wandered the city streets. He stumbled past strangers who looked away or crossed the road to avoid him. His clothes were soaked from rain, and the infection on his forehead worsened, spreading down his temple in angry red streaks. Yet even in his delirium, he clung to one thought: Dad will find me. He always keeps his promises. By the third day, Leo was at his breaking point. He wandered into a park, collapsing beneath a bench. The world was spinning, and every sound felt distant. He tried to stand, his legs shaking like reeds in the wind, but the effort sent him crashing back to the ground. The glow of a nearby bakery caught his eye. Summoning the last of his strength, he staggered toward it, pressing his tiny hands against the glass. Inside, people were laughing and eating pastries. Leo's lips moved, forming silent pleas for help, but the words wouldn't come. With a final gasp, he collapsed, his body crumpling onto the wet pavement. Victoria Hayes was running late after her hospital shift. Her scrubs clung to her skin from the rain, and her arms were weighed down with groceries. As she passed the bakery, a small figure lying on the sidewalk stopped her in her tracks. Dropping her bags, Victoria knelt beside the boy. His face was pale and smeared with blood, and his feverish skin radiated heat even in the cold rain. "Hey, sweetheart," she murmured, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Can you hear me?" The boy's eyelids fluttered. "Dad," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Victoria's chest tightened. She scooped him into her arms and flagged down a cab, her mind racing. At her apartment, she laid the boy on her bed and began treating his injuries. The gash on his forehead was deep, the infection severe. She worked tirelessly through the night, cleaning his wounds, administering antibiotics, and forcing drops of water into his mouth. As dawn broke, the boy stirred. "Daddy," he croaked, his eyes unfocused. "Shh," Victoria said gently, sitting beside him. "You're safe now." Through broken sentences, Leo began to tell his story. Victoria listened, horrified, as he described the crash, Clara's lies, and his days on the streets. The anger in her chest burned brighter with every word. "No one's going to hurt you again," she promised, holding his tiny hand. Elliot's hands trembled as he clutched the wheel, the rain blurring the city's lights into streaks of gray and gold. His heart pounded with the realization that Leo might still be alive. Clara's lies haunted him, each revelation about her deceit layering guilt over his anguish. How could he have been so blind? Turning onto an unfamiliar street, he slowed as he spotted a woman near a bakery. She was carrying a boy, small, fragile, his hair matted with mud and rain. Elliot's heart leapt into his throat. It couldn't be, could it? He braked sharply, parking haphazardly on the curb, and ran toward them. But before he could reach her, a cab pulled up, and the woman climbed in with the boy cradled in her arms. "Wait," Elliot shouted, his voice lost in the storm. He flagged down another cab, his breath coming in short gasps. "Follow that car," he commanded the driver, handing over a wad of bills. The chase through the rain-slicked streets was tense. Elliot's fingers gripped the seat as he watched the cab ahead wind through the narrow lanes. But at a junction, the car had turned, disappearing into the web of the city. Elliot slammed his fist against the seat, despair creeping into his chest. "Sir, we lost them," the cab driver said apologetically. Defeated but determined, Elliot spent the rest of the night combing the streets. He stopped at every corner, every shop, asking if anyone had seen a woman and a boy fitting their description. At dawn, he returned home, his body aching with exhaustion but his mind refusing to rest. That morning, he turned to private investigators, sharing the details he could remember. It was late afternoon when a call came. "We've tracked her to an apartment complex on the west side," the investigator informed him. Elliot's heart raced as he drove to the address. When he knocked on the door, his breath caught in his throat. Victoria opened it cautiously, her tired eyes meeting his. Behind her, on the couch, was Leo, his small frame wrapped in blankets, his face pale but unmistakably alive. "Daddy." Leo's voice was hoarse but filled with joy as he scrambled off the couch, running into his father's arms. Elliot fell to his knees, holding Leo close. "I've got you, buddy," he choked out. "You're safe now. Daddy's here." Victoria watched the reunion with tears in her eyes. Elliot turned to her, his voice trembling. "You saved him. I don't even know how to thank you." Victoria shook her head. "He's a fighter. He survived because of his strength." Elliot brought Leo to the hospital immediately, where doctors began treating him for the infection and malnutrition. While Leo rested, Elliot and Victoria shared their accounts with each other. Every word Victoria said about Leo's feverish ramblings about Clara's lies and her cruelty confirmed Elliot's worst fears. He called the police that evening. "Clara Warren is my wife," he told the investigator. "She's been planning this for months. She forged documents, and she faked my son's death." The officers launched a manhunt for Clara, and Elliot handed over every piece of evidence he'd uncovered. The next few days were tense, with updates trickling in from the authorities. They traced Clara to a series of hotel stays, finally apprehending her at the airport, where she was attempting to board a flight under a false name. "She's in custody now," the detective told Elliot. "We have enough evidence to ensure she'll be behind bars for a long time." Elliot exhaled deeply, the weight of months of manipulation and grief finally lifting. Meanwhile, Leo's recovery was steady. Victoria became a constant presence in the hospital, bringing books, toys, and even homemade soup to coax Leo's appetite. She sat with him during his restless nights, telling him stories or holding his hand as he fought through bad dreams. One afternoon, as Victoria read aloud from a book, Leo looked up at her with wide eyes. "You're like a superhero," he said simply. Victoria laughed softly. "Not quite, little one, but I'll always protect you." Elliot, standing by the doorway, watched the exchange with a heart full of gratitude. He realized that Victoria wasn't just a caregiver, she was part of their story now, someone who had risked everything for a child she didn't even know. Weeks later, Leo was finally discharged from the hospital. The drive home was quiet, but filled with the sense of new beginnings. As they pulled into the driveway of their sprawling house, Leo hesitated. "Is it safe now?" he asked, his voice small. Elliot knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's safe, buddy. I promise. No one will ever hurt you again." Inside, Elliot set to work, transforming their home. He painted the walls in cheerful colors, replaced old furniture with items Leo picked out, and planted a garden filled with flowers Victoria had recommended for their calming scents. The basement where Elliot had uncovered Clara's secrets was sealed and turned into a storage room. Victoria became a regular visitor. She spent weekends in the garden with Leo, teaching him how to care for the plants, or joining him in building elaborate train tracks that wound through the living room. Her laughter and warmth filled the house, and her presence became a source of comfort for both father and son. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Leo looked up from his plate. "Can Victoria stay forever?" Elliot chuckled, glancing at her. "Well, that's up to her." Victoria smiled, her cheeks flushing. "I think I'll always be around, Leo. You're kind of stuck with me now." Months passed, and life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Leo returned to school, his scars, both physical and emotional, beginning to fade. His teachers marveled at his resilience, and his classmates welcomed him back with open arms. Victoria's bond with the family deepened. She became not just a guest, but a fixture in their lives. She joined them for holidays, attended school events, and even started helping Leo with his art projects. One sunny Sunday afternoon, as they sat under the oak tree in the backyard, Leo turned to his father. "You know, Dad, we're kind of like superheroes now. We beat the bad guys and we're stronger because of it." Elliot smiled, pulling him into a hug. "That's right, buddy. We're a team. And we've got the best family anyone could ask for." Victoria, sitting nearby with a book, glanced up and smiled at the scene. She felt a deep sense of belonging, as though fate had brought her to this family for a reason. From that day forward, the house was filled with laughter, love, and the comforting knowledge that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Leo's story became one of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, love has the power to heal and rebuild. The past would always be a part of their story, but it no longer defined them. Instead, they chose to focus on the future, one filled with happiness, trust, and the unbreakable bonds of their chosen family.